My name is Bailey Rhodes. I'm 26 years old, and on the night that was supposed to bring my family closer together, my mother looked directly at me and calmly said, "You have 48 hours to move out." For a second, everything seemed to stop. The warm glow of the Christmas tree flickered softly across the dining table, its lights reflecting off the plates and glasses, casting gentle shadows over the faces of the people I thought I understood. No one said a word, not my father, not my sister. The only sounds in the room were the low hum of the heater and the rich smell of roasted turkey filling the air. The warmth that should have felt comforting instead felt suffocating, almost cruel in its irony. I looked from face to face, waiting for someone to laugh or shake their head and admit it was some twisted joke, but no one did. My mother calmly continued slicing the turkey, as though she hadn't just broken something fragile and final between us. My father lifted his wineglass and took another quiet sip. My sister kept scrolling through her phone like nothing unusual had happened. That was the moment something clicked inside me. Betrayal doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, hidden inside ordinary moments, wearing the familiar faces of the people you call family. I didn't ask for an explanation. I didn't plead or demand answers. I simply sat there staring at people who shared my blood, yet suddenly felt like strangers. Each beat of my heart seemed heavier than the last, echoing painfully in my chest. When the night finally ended, I walked silently back to my room, packed my things, and made a decision that felt both terrifying and freeing. This would be the last time I ever sat at that table. Early the next morning, before anyone else woke up, I walked out the front door without saying goodbye and without looking back, leaving behind the rent payments, utility bills, and property taxes that I had quietly stopped covering. Before we go further, tell me your city and the time where you are right now. I'm curious to know how far this story about family and betrayal has reached. The morning after leaving that house, one question kept repeating in my mind. How did things end up like this? It hadn't always been so tense or bitter. There was a time when our small home in Tampa felt light and easy, filled with simple routines and familiar comfort. My father, Edward, wore his police badge with quiet pride every day, and my mother, Margaret, worked part-time as a nurse at a nearby clinic. We weren't wealthy by any means, but life had a steady rhythm. Bills were handled on time. Birthdays were celebrated with cake and laughter. Dinner meant conversation and jokes instead of the heavy silence that would come later. Everything changed when my father retired earlier than planned after a back injury. His pension barely covered the basics, and medical bills began piling up faster than we could keep track of them. My mother started picking up extra shifts at the clinic, but as the months passed, her smile slowly faded under the pressure. Around the same time, I had just landed my first real job as a junior accountant. I was barely learning how to manage my own finances when I began stepping in to help them. At first, it was small things like groceries or utility payments. Then it became mortgage contributions. At the time, it felt natural to help. After all, that's what a good daughter does. I was only 21, and in my mind, money seemed like the simplest way to show love and support. Each time I sent part of my paycheck home, my mother would smile and say, "You're such a blessing, Bailey." I believed her completely. What I didn't realize then was that my support would slowly transform from helping occasionally into carrying the entire household on my shoulders. My older sister Hannah had been drifting aimlessly for years. She had quit her marketing job, claiming she needed time to discover her passion. That supposed passion eventually turned into attending yoga retreats and spending hours shopping online. She moved back home, insisting it would only be temporary while she figured things out. But temporary slowly turned permanent. Within a few months, she was living entirely under the roof that my salary supported. When I carefully mentioned it one evening, Dad simply sighed and said she was still finding her way in life. Mom gently told me not to be so critical. "You've always been the responsible one, Bailey. You understand." That word, understand, slowly wrapped around my life like a rope. It excused everything. Then there was Lydia, my youngest sister. She had just turned 19 and was still attending college. Lydia was bright and hopeful, but too shy to ask anyone for help. So I offered before she ever had to. I paid her tuition fees, bought her textbooks each semester, and even helped her purchase a used car so she could drive to campus. I never mentioned any of it to the rest of the family. I simply wanted her to have opportunities without drowning in student debt like so many others. Month after month, my income seemed to vanish into their needs. I kept telling myself it would only last until Dad's pension improved, or until Mom earned more overtime, or until Hannah eventually found stable work. But those untils never actually arrived. By the third year, I realized something unsettling. I was the only person in the entire family bringing in steady income, and I was also the only one pretending everything was normal. Mom stopped taking night shifts, explaining that her back could no longer handle the strain. Dad spent his afternoons repairing small things around the yard before settling onto the couch for long naps. Hannah's short stay turned into years of complaints about how unfair life was to her. Lydia remained quiet most of the time, caught somewhere between gratitude and guilt. The house that once felt warm and welcoming slowly turned into something else entirely. It began to feel like an account I kept pouring money into without ever receiving anything back. I was paying for comfort that I never truly experienced myself. Sometimes I would return home from work and find every light in the house left on, the television blaring loudly in the living room, and empty takeout containers scattered across the kitchen counter. The exhaustion I felt in those moments wasn't from work. It came from knowing that I would be the one cleaning everything up while everyone else relaxed. One evening, I cautiously suggested that maybe everyone should start contributing a little more financially. My mother frowned at me as if I had said something offensive. "Family doesn't keep score, sweetheart," she replied gently. I wanted to answer that it certainly felt like someone was keeping score, and I was the only one losing, but I swallowed the words before they left my mouth. My father began jokingly calling me our little provider, like it was something amusing rather than exhausting. Hannah would roll her eyes whenever I mentioned saving money for my own apartment. "Please," she would laugh. "You'd miss us within a week." I didn't laugh with her because deep down I knew the truth. I wasn't afraid of missing them. What scared me was the possibility that I might discover I didn't actually need them at all. Days slowly blended into months, and months quietly turned into years. My paychecks arrived and disappeared like waves pulling away from the shore, leaving me drained yet strangely proud at the same time. Every sacrifice felt noble on the surface, yet hollow underneath. I convinced myself this was what love looked like, that sacrificing for family made me a better person. It took far longer than it should have for me to realize the truth. I was no longer helping a struggling family. I had become the financial support system for their habits. Eventually, there came a moment when I unlocked the front door after work and realized I felt like a visitor in my own home. By that time, the house had begun to feel more like a rental property I was obligated to maintain. Every room, every appliance, every bill carried traces of my paycheck, yet none of it truly felt like it belonged to me. The walls echoed with everyone else's voices, and my name was only mentioned whenever something needed to be repaired or paid for. My mother had also developed a habit of reminding me that I should feel grateful. "You should appreciate having a home like this," she would say while folding laundry washed with detergent I had purchased myself. Not everyone gets to live under a roof surrounded by family. I often wanted to tell her that what surrounded me no longer felt like family. It felt like responsibility. But once again, I held my tongue. Gratitude had somehow turned into a one-sided arrangement. Hannah, of course, had her own way of turning my efforts into entertainment. "You really believe money can buy respect, little sister?" she would say with a smirk while relaxing on the couch. The couch, I might add, that I had paid for. Her nails would be freshly done, also paid for indirectly by my contributions. She spoke with a playful tone that wasn't openly cruel, but still sharp enough to sting. Most of the time, I chose silence rather than wasting energy trying to explain how tired I felt. The more I gave to that household, the smaller I seemed to feel within it. Dad mostly stayed out of the arguments. He would occasionally glance up from the television, sigh deeply, and mumble something about letting the women handle their own disagreements. He preferred comfort to confrontation. The remote in his hand was more familiar than the idea of taking a side. To him, peace meant pretending nothing was wrong. Each evening followed a pattern. Hannah lounging in the living room, Mom complaining about bills as if she wasn't holding my debit card, Dad quietly checking the sports channel. I moved around like a ghost. Sometimes Mom would make little remarks while I worked late at the kitchen table. "You know, Bailey, when I was your age, I didn't have someone taking care of me." Her tone carried pride, but also accusation. I wanted to ask why she couldn't see that I wasn't being taken care of. I was the caretaker. But arguing felt pointless. In this house, logic never beat guilt. One night, when the air conditioning broke down, I called a repair service without asking anyone. The next morning, I found Mom on the phone telling her friend, "Oh yes, we got it fixed. Edward handled it." I stood there invisible again. It wasn't about credit. It was about erasure. My work was only visible when it failed. There were moments when I thought about moving out, but guilt whispered louder than reason. They need me, I'd tell myself, even as Hannah joked about our little ATM. Lydia tried to defend me once, saying, "Bailey works hard for all of us." Mom immediately corrected her. "She works for herself, sweetheart. We all contribute in our own ways." I remember Lydia falling silent, realizing that truth had no room in that conversation. The imbalance became a rhythm. My schedule revolved around their needs: rent, grocery runs, emergencies. Their lives moved freely while mine was pinned under expectation. At night, I'd lie awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, and sometimes the faint laughter from Hannah's room. It sounded like a celebration I wasn't invited to. The breaking point came quietly. One afternoon, after paying another overdue electric bill, I walked into the kitchen where Mom and Hannah were talking about redecorating the living room. I mentioned almost casually, maybe everyone could chip in for the next month's utilities. The room fell silent. Mom froze, then turned to me with a look I'd seen before, a mix of pity and disappointment. "Bailey," she said, her voice sweet but sharp, "families don't keep score. That's not how love works." I stared at her, trying to find the logic in her words. Hannah smirked, stirring her coffee like she'd just witnessed a lesson being taught. My throat tightened. I wanted to ask why love always seemed to cost me the most, but the answer was already written across their faces. They didn't see imbalance. They saw order, the kind that kept me at the bottom, holding everything up. That evening, I sat alone on the porch, while the sun slipped behind the neighbors' roofs. I could hear laughter from inside, the same laughter that used to make me smile, but now it only reminded me how foreign it felt. The house glowed warmly from the outside, the kind of glow people mistake for happiness. Inside, I was slowly disappearing into the wallpaper. Money had made me indispensable, but never respected. Every favor became expected, every effort invisible. Gratitude was demanded, never given. I kept trying to convince myself that things would even out someday, that once they understood, they'd finally treat me as part of the family again. But deep down, I knew the truth. That silence couldn't hide anymore. Bailey realized fairness had never existed in that house. That Christmas night, I hoped for peace. The table shimmered with candlelight, the turkey glistening in the center, Lydia chatting cheerfully about her classes. For a brief moment, I believed we could pretend to be the family we once were. Even Hannah laughed, her glass of wine reflecting the soft gold of the lights. But peace in my family never lasted long. Mom carved the turkey carefully, smiling that holiday smile. "This year's been hard," she began, her voice calm, almost gentle. "But we're together, and that's what matters." I nodded, forcing a smile of my own. Then she added, "And since we're together, there's something we should talk about." The knife stopped mid-cut. "Hannah's had a rough few months," she continued. "She fell behind on her credit cards. $22,000. The interest alone is impossible. We thought maybe you could help her out, Bailey." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. The warmth of the candles felt like it turned to fire beneath my skin. "You want me to pay her debt?" I asked quietly. Hannah didn't even look embarrassed. She sipped her wine and shrugged. "You make the most money, don't you? It's not like you can't afford it." I felt the room tilt. The silverware gleamed under the lights. Every sound seemed too loud, every breath too shallow. "I've been paying for this house, for everything in it," I said slowly. "I can't keep fixing everyone's mistakes." Mom's smile vanished. "Don't be dramatic," she replied. "You know we always support each other. It's family." Dad cleared his throat, the tone in his voice colder than I'd ever heard. "Your sister's drowning, Bailey. What's a few more checks to write? You've always been responsible. This is your duty." The word duty cut deeper than any accusation. "I've done my duty," I said, my voice shaking, "and I'm tired of being punished for it." Hannah leaned back in her chair, lips curling. "There it is," she said softly. "The martyr act. You just love reminding everyone how much you do. Maybe it's not about helping anymore. Maybe you just want control." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Control?" I repeated. "You think I want control?" I wanted balance, respect, maybe even gratitude. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. "Enough. You've changed, Bailey. You used to be generous. Now you're selfish and ungrateful." Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in realization. I looked at each of them, faces I'd once known better than my own. "I'm not ungrateful," I said softly. "I'm just done being used." For a second, no one spoke. The candles flickered. Then Dad slammed his hand against the table. "Watch your tone," he barked. "We raised you better than this. We taught you to take care of family." "No," I said. "You taught me to carry you." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Mom stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice was ice when she spoke. "You have 48 hours to move out." The sentence didn't sound real. Lydia gasped. Hannah hid a smirk behind her wine glass. I sat still, feeling something inside me untangle at last. The pain wasn't loud. It was quiet, like relief disguised as heartbreak. I rose from my chair slowly. "You just made it easier," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands trembled as I placed my napkin on the table. No one stopped me. I turned and walked down the hallway, my steps echoing softly against the hardwood floor. Behind me, the clinking of silverware began again, mechanical, detached, like nothing had happened. The laughter didn't return this time. Only the sound of knives and forks scraping against porcelain filled the room, a metallic rhythm marking the moment our family broke for good. The next morning, the house felt hollow. The Christmas lights still blinked weakly across the living room, but their glow only made the silence look deeper. I woke before sunrise, not because of rest, but because my body had learned to move before emotion could catch up. My room was cold. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting on the blanket. I wouldn't be folding again. Then I stood, opened the closet, and started packing. Every sound was sharp. The scrape of a hanger, the whisper of fabric, the metallic rasp of a zipper. It felt like the house was listening. I didn't rush. There was a strange calm in knowing that I was finally doing something for myself. Each item went into the suitcase with a kind of ceremony. Shirts, shoes, a framed photo I hesitated over before slipping face down between two sweaters. The walls had watched me grow up, break down, and build everyone else's comfort. Now they watched me leave it behind. When I stepped into the hallway, the air smelled faintly of coffee and leftover turkey. The house still held the illusion of normalcy, as if last night hadn't shattered it. I moved quietly, my socks silent against the floorboards. As I reached for the last box, I heard a small knock. Lydia stood in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. She was still in her pajamas, arms crossed over her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. "You're really going," she said softly. "I have to," I replied. She nodded, then whispered, "I wanted to say something last night. I should have said something." I looked at her, the youngest, the one who'd never asked for anything. "It wouldn't have changed them," I said gently. Tears welled in her eyes. "Mom said you'll come back when things calm down." I smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'll see you in another lifetime." She stepped forward and hugged me tightly. It surprised me how fragile she felt. For years, I'd carried this family without realizing who was quietly breaking under the same weight. I pressed my chin to her shoulder and said, "Don't become them, Lydia, please." Her voice cracked. "I won't." When she left the doorway, I placed my keys on the dresser. There was a kind of freedom in not having to hold on to them anymore. Downstairs, the kitchen looked almost peaceful. The dishes from last night were gone, the table reset like nothing had happened. I pulled a thick envelope from my bag and set it on the counter. Inside were the final bills: rent, utilities, taxes, all stamped unpaid. I'd canceled every automatic payment an hour earlier. For the first time in years, their comfort wouldn't depend on me. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting on the counter I'd scrubbed 100 times, feeling the cold surface beneath my palm. Then I turned toward the window. The sun was rising, bleeding pale gold through the frost. It made everything cleaner, even the house that had never truly been mine. As I picked up my suitcase, a floorboard creaked behind me. Mom stood in the doorway, still in her robe, hair messy from sleep. She looked older than I remembered. "We'll talk later," she said, voice tight but measured, like she still believed she could control the narrative. I paused. "There's nothing left to say, Bailey," she said softer now, almost pleading. "You'll regret this." I met her eyes. "Maybe, but I'll regret staying more." For a long second, neither of us moved. Then she looked away, arms folding across her chest like she needed protection from the quiet. I turned back toward the door, picked up my coat, and opened it. The cold air rushed in, sharp and honest. It stung, but it felt like truth. Behind me, Mom muttered something I didn't catch. It didn't matter. On my way out, I stopped in the hallway and took one last look. The photos on the wall, vacations, birthdays, the illusion of unity, stared back like witnesses. I'd spent my whole life trying to keep those frames from falling apart. Now I realized they'd been crooked all along. I stepped outside.
The driveway was covered in a thin layer of frost, each step leaving a mark that glimmered briefly before fading. My car waited at the curb, a small, ordinary thing that had suddenly become my escape. I placed the suitcase in the trunk and stood there for a moment, breathing in the quiet. From the open window upstairs, I saw Lydia watching. She didn't wave, just held my gaze, her expression steady and sad. I nodded once, and she nodded back. It was enough. I got into the car, started the engine, and let it idle for a few seconds. The air vents coughed out a weak gust of heat. The radio came on automatically, some old holiday song still playing across town. It sounded hollow, like it belonged to another world. As I pulled away from the house, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The past didn't need witnesses anymore. The house grew smaller in the distance, its windows reflecting the pale morning light. Empty, cold, familiar. For the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible for holding anything together. The road ahead was quiet, and so was I. Silence had never felt so loud. Freedom smelled like salt and rain. The air in Tampa felt heavier, wetter, alive, in a way Cleveland never did. When I stepped out of my car that first morning, the wind from the bay tangled my hair and filled my lungs with something that felt like forgiveness. I had driven 12 hours straight, the car packed with everything I owned, mostly boxes, a few clothes, and a quiet determination to rebuild from nothing. The small apartment I'd rented sat on a narrow street that led straight to the water. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom with peeling paint, humming pipes, and a window that didn't close all the way. But to me, it was the first place that didn't echo someone else's rules. For the first week, I stayed with Melissa, my old college friend who'd escaped our hometown years ago. She greeted me with open arms and the smell of coffee. "You made it," she said, grinning. "Barely," I replied, my voice thin from the road. "You're here," she said, handing me a mug. "That's what matters now. Start over." Those words stuck with me. Start over. I repeated them in my head as I unpacked during the following days. The apartment came alive piece by piece. First, a mattress on the floor, then secondhand curtains fluttering with the sea breeze, then a small table I found at a thrift store. I paid my first month's rent with my own card and smiled when the receipt printed out. For the first time, every dollar I spent went toward my life, not someone else's comfort. I bought groceries for one, a carton of eggs, a loaf of bread, a small bag of coffee. Standing at the counter frying an egg, I realized I didn't have to rush anymore. No one was waiting for me. No one was taking from me. The loneliness that once scared me now felt like peace, wearing a new face. On the third day, I bought a desk. Simple, light wood, smooth to the touch. Setting it up took me hours, not because it was difficult, but because I wanted it perfect. It became the center of my new world. On top of it, I placed a small plant, its leaves bright and stubborn. I didn't even know what kind it was. "You'll do fine here," I said softly to it, half smiling. In the evenings, I walked to the bay, where the water reflected the pink glow of sunset. Children laughed near the docks. Old couples fed gulls on benches. I liked how the world kept moving. Steady, indifferent, beautiful. The wind smelled of brine and possibility. Melissa visited on Friday with takeout boxes and a cheap bottle of wine. "So," she said, settling on the floor beside me, "how does freedom taste?" I laughed. "Expensive," I said, "but worth every cent." We clinked glasses. "You'll be fine," she told me. "You've always been the one holding everyone else together. Now it's your turn." Her words sank deep. For years, I had been the glue holding a house that never truly wanted me. Now I didn't need to hold anything but myself. That night, the rain began. Soft at first, then steady. Tapping against the window like fingertips, reminding me I wasn't alone. I turned off the lights and lay in bed listening. Tampa rain sounded different. It wasn't gray or heavy like back home. It was clean. It washed away things I didn't know I still carried. I thought about my past without bitterness, about my family without anger. They felt distant now, like characters from a book I'd already finished. The ache that used to live in my chest had softened into something gentler. Acceptance. Outside, the city hummed with life. Cars, waves, thunder rolling faintly over the bay. And for once, it didn't overwhelm me. I breathed deeply, the air cool and damp, the room glowing with reflections from the streetlights. As I closed my eyes, I realized I didn't miss the noise of the old house or the weight of keeping it together. Tampa didn't ask me to carry anyone. It only asked me to live. And I did. I was finally living, not just surviving. Trouble always finds its way back. That morning, my phone buzzed 3 times before I finally glanced at the screen. Mom. I watched it ring until it stopped. A minute later, it started again. Her voice message came through. Soft, sugary, but tight at the edges. "Bailey, sweetheart, we just wanted to talk. Call us, okay? I didn't.
I made coffee instead, the steam curling against the window, pretending the world outside my apartment was wider than the one I'd left behind. By afternoon, the sky turned gray. Thunder rolled faintly over the bay. I thought it was just another storm until someone knocked. 3 sharp hits, too heavy, too familiar. My stomach sank. Through the peephole, I saw them. Mom, Dad, and Hannah stood in the hallway, soaked from the drizzle. My heart raced, but my hand still turned the lock. "What are you doing here?" I asked, voice flat. Mom's smile was tight, rehearsed. "We were in the area," she lied. "Can we come in?" Before I could answer, they stepped inside. The air changed instantly. Warmth drained from the room. Dad looked around, unimpressed. "Small place," he muttered. Hannah stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes swollen. Mom began. "We've had some problems back home." She paused, scanning my face for sympathy that wasn't there. "The landlord cut off power, said we missed 2 months' rent. Your father's been trying to talk to him, but he's being unreasonable." I said nothing. She went on. "We just need a little help, just this once. You're doing well here, right?" My jaw clenched. "How much?" I asked. 23,000. And Dad answered before she could. "It'll cover the bills and Hannah's." "Her credit cards?" I finished for him. Silence. Dad's face tightened. "Family helps family," he said sharply. "You've got savings. You owe us at least that much after everything we did for you." The words hit like cold water. I laughed softly, not from humor but disbelief. "Everything you did for me?" Mom stepped forward, voice trembling. "Bailey, please, we're struggling. I know you're angry, but we're still your family." "You taught me that love means debt," I said quietly. "I'm done paying." Hannah sniffed, her voice cracking. "Please, Bailey, it's not my fault. I didn't ask for." "You didn't stop asking either," I cut in. "Every time I helped, you wanted more. I kept waiting for someone to say thank you, but all I got was silence until you needed me again." Dad's temper flared. "Watch your tone," he barked. "We didn't raise you to talk to your parents like that." I met his eyes. "You didn't raise me at all. You just drained me." He opened his mouth to argue, but I was already done. I walked to the door, held it open. "You should go." Mom's voice broke. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but at least it'll be my regret, not yours." Hannah's tears fell freely now. "Please, can't we just start over?" I shook my head. "I did. You didn't." They stood there for a moment. 3 people who once defined my world, now strangers I barely recognized. Then Mom sighed, whispered, "Let's go." Dad hesitated, then followed. Hannah turned last, her face a blur of guilt and fear. I didn't move until the hallway went silent again. I locked the door, leaned my forehead against the wood, and let out a long breath. Outside, the rain picked up, pattering against the window like applause for a decision too long delayed. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt, just space, clean, quiet, and mine. The kind of silence that used to frighten me now felt like proof of freedom. I made another cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the streetlights flicker on one by one. The storm outside kept raging, but inside it was calm. I knew this peace would last, not because they were gone, but because I finally meant it when I closed that door. Months passed before their names stopped appearing on my phone. At first, I'd still glance at the screen when it buzzed, a small part of me hoping for something different, a message that wasn't about guilt or money. But silence, I learned, could be a form of healing, too. One afternoon, Melissa came by with takeout and an envelope. "Your sister sent this," she said. My hands froze. "Which one?" I asked, though I already knew. "Lydia, the only one who hadn't come to my door that day." I waited until she left to open it. Inside was a short letter written in Lydia's careful handwriting. "Bailey," it began, "I wanted to thank you. You were the only one who ever told me the truth, even when it hurt. I used to think love meant giving up everything for others, but you showed me it's supposed to make you feel safe. I finally understand that love isn't debt, it's respect. I'm working 2 jobs now. It's hard, but I feel free. I hope you're happy where you are." I read those lines 3 times. The ink slightly smudged near her signature, as if she'd cried while writing. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of relief. Someone had understood. The chain had broken somewhere. Later that week, I heard from an old neighbor back home. Word travels fast in small towns. Mom and Dad had lost the house. The bank repossessed it after months of missed payments. They'd moved into a relative's basement, too proud to ask anyone else for help. Hannah, apparently, was still drowning in debt. Her car had been taken back after she'd defaulted. I didn't feel joy in hearing it, just distance.
like reading about strangers whose names happened to match my family's. Sometimes I wondered if they blamed me. Sometimes I wondered if they finally saw the truth. But those thoughts didn't linger long. Life in Tampa had a way of reminding me to stay present. The sunset still painted the bay gold, and the air still smelled of salt and possibility. I often sat on my small balcony with coffee, the same one I'd bought on my first day here, watching the waves move with patient rhythm. I thought about how long I had lived on survival mode, how exhaustion had become routine, and how quiet strength now filled its place. I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer. Family should be a home, not alone. For the first time, it didn't sound bitter. It sounded true. I folded Lydia's letter neatly, placed it in the drawer beside my desk, and turned toward the window where the last light of the day shimmered. The world outside felt both new and familiar, like breathing after years underwater. I had finally surfaced. I looked out at the horizon and smiled. "Thank you for listening to my story," I whispered, imagining the faces of strangers who might hear it one day. If you've ever had to choose between peace and family, tell me, what would you have done in my